Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This week we're just looking back at a competition that we had last weekend, the ITA Irish Cup. It's our first competition in 20 months. It's been quite a long time for us, and because of that we have a lot to reflect on, a lot of developments and a lot to look forward to on the back of that competition as well. So if you'd like to hear our thoughts on returning to competition after COVID, stick with us for this episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back. So in today's episode, we're going to just kind of go through some of the things that we have as talking points from last weekend's ITA Irish Cup National Championships. So it was one of the first tournaments back for us here in Ireland. We've been on a lockdown for a lot of the time during COVID, so it's fantastic to be back first off. For me personally, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to learn as instructors, as coaches, and I love competition for that reason. And that's what it is for me. We learn things, we pick up things that, okay, we need to do this better, this is working well. So for me, it's almost kind of like that test as such of what we're going to work on for the next while going forward. Exactly. So it's great to be back. The tournament was fantastic, really well run, and we got some really, really good level at the tournament as well. And I think maybe that's a nice little place to start. Competition after COVID. What were your expectations coming into this? What was kind of the expectations for the standard and the level that you were expecting?
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose it's very important to say from the outset that, yeah, we had some different challenges in terms of the setup of this compared to previous years. So this is the 21st, and it should have been the 22nd, but last year it got cancelled. It's the 21st time that we've run this competition. Myself and Stephen Ryan host the competition, so for us all of the local requirements were on us, so we were really preoccupied, as well as the tournament committee beforehand, just with all of the COVID related things, the health and safety stuff, the child safeguarding stuff, all of the logistics of the setup, moving more and more equipment every year, the time it takes to set it up, and then all of that with the added protocols and precautions that we'd have in relation to COVID. So It was a little bit different, but on a competitive point of view, it was also a big unknown because, as I look into it, I was watching my athletes and I'm thinking to myself, look, they're looking okay as far as the club training goes, but I don't know what okay is because I haven't seen what the rest of the country is doing.
Judging them off each other, exactly. Yeah,
you're kind of basing it off of it. Like, we had the advantage of being able to base it off what we're seeing at squads, but it's very hard to know how the yellow belts compare or how the first timers compare and so on. So all I was telling my people beforehand is, like, we have to get our feet wet again. We have to get back in to set a baseline, because if we don't know where we're at relative to the rest of the group, we really don't know what we need to be working on. What we're doing is good enough, if it needs to be at a higher level, how is the intensity going to be, so for me that was the whole point of this event, was it's going to be that setting that baseline and a benchmark on which to build as we move forward.
Yeah, I think so. And like the standard for me, I was expecting maybe the standard in sparring to be down a little bit because we haven't been able to spar for a long time now in Ireland, but the level was still very strong, I have to say. Patterns level quite strong as well. I was expecting that to be quite high, and that was shown on the mats as well. Like myself and yourself have put in a lot of work during COVID with online stuff.
Oh yeah.
So of course the patterns and the technical side was something that we were kind of focusing on for the last while. So that was something that we were looking to kind of push to the forefront and maybe do a little bit better than usual. And I think that definitely paid off. I think that the whole idea of the different learning styles that we have, sparring versus the technical side with patterns, it's completely different. You can train patterns in isolation and by yourself if you have a little bit of interaction with your coach online or through technology, whatever, but sparring is a different game. So I think it was interesting to see that, and almost like a little bit of an experiment and see the results, that sparring cannot be trained effectively by yourself, where patterns definitely can.
Yeah, and I think where I saw a big difference there, the coaching has much less impact on the pattern, as in the coaching in event. So the coaching of pattern all happens beforehand. And the ones who did more of the Zoom stuff, who stayed engaged with the club the whole way through, indoors, outdoors, Zoom and all the rest of it, certainly performed better than the ones that kind of took their times away and came back, or the ones who had only just who had no competition experience previously. So definitely saw that. But when it came to the sparring, what we started to see was it's been 2 years since anyone's been coached at ringside as well, and we haven't managed to simulate that experience for competitors in the ring. And like, we can talk about this a little bit more later on, but people who were under 13, you know, the last time we had a competition, could now be 15. And in Ireland, our under 13s are coached by the teenagers, the colour belts, and the senior coaches of the clubs don't really coach them at ringside until they're 14 plus. And what that does, there's a few different reasons for that, but what it does is it means the first time they're really getting to interact with a coach, you know, who has strong opinions, who's listening, who's pushing, sometimes is 14. It depends on who they've been working with. But so we had people who were 15 years of age who've never listened to a coach, who've never had to really take on board what's being said to them or react to a changing situation in the ring. So we found that quite difficult. There were matches that, you know, we were sitting behind someone and you're like, okay, we can definitely bring this around, we can definitely win this, but they just didn't know how to listen. They didn't know what, they didn't have the language built up yet. So really looking forward to how that progresses over the next series of events too.
Yeah, and that's important because there's like the experience of that as well for these young kids. Like some of these coaches who were there to coach these guys under 13 were in that category themselves at the last tournament.
That's right.
So they're quite inexperienced, and simple things that I picked up kind of going around having a look at some of the sparring events in particular was simple things like people think they're 4-0 up and very comfortable, but they might be only 1 point up on the scoreboard. Good. And then you also see people who think that, okay, the game is over because there's 4-0 on the other side, but 2 flags are completely off because the scores are kind of a bit crazy, but there's 2 flags still to be got, and that's all you need. You only need 2 flags not to lose if you're behind on the scorecards.
Yeah, you can play for the draw.
So you can pull it back to a draw and reset again, and that's something that it just comes with experience. And of course, these younger kids aren't really aware of that. They haven't had the luxury of training with scoreboards and things like that, so that is a new kind of almost thing that they have to deal with, and it's a big factor as well.
Well, that's it, and that actually played out very well with a final in, I think, -145 junior female green belts or thereabouts, like, and myself and Richie had girls in the final of that, but that one went to that exactly. It Richie's girl was 4-0 up with the last 15 or 20 seconds to go, and the girl from my club managed to pull it back to 1 flag for Richie's girl and 3 draw. And of course that's enough to bring it to a draw, but it's the barest minimum. But if the coach doesn't realize, if the competitor doesn't realize that they can still be in the fight at that stage, then, you know, that's an experience that's needed. So yeah, I thought that was hugely beneficial to get people in the ring, and we will talk about the effect of the scoreboards a little bit later on.
Yeah.
But maybe just to give people an impression of what the tournament was and looks like, we'll have a look at the setup, and in doing this we went back and said, well, this is the 21st year, and again should be the 22nd, but rolling it back, this was the setup in 2002, so the 3rd iteration of the tournament. And for anyone who's not been around Taekwondo that long, this was almost state of the art in Ireland at the time, believe it or not. So, you know,
wondering what Matt's
wondering now, I mean, in fairness, that was an under 6 division that we were running. They were all like tots, white belts, 4 and 5 years of age, really, and, you know, wearing body armor, the hogus, and a bit of touch contact. But you can see some of our early, what we thought were, you know, wild innovations at the time. So the tablecloth colours were because, well, the yellow and white ones are for white and yellow belts, the green and blue ones are for green and blue belts, and the red and black ones were for red and black belts. So a little bit of helping people find where they needed to be in the tournament. And then behind the chairs where the judges would be sitting, you can see these poles, and that was just what now and next. So the top one would be on the division that was on now, and the bottom sign was the division that would be on next. And that was the earliest bit of people having some clue where they'd be or what time they'd be on the day. But it was quite a little bit different from from what we would expect now. But the fact that there were seats in the hall, the fact that, you know, there was some notion as to what would happen, you know, in the upcoming events, or that we'd planned what categories would be in what ring, actually at the time set us apart in Ireland, as scary as that is to think about. but we've moved.
That's actually something that we took for granted, because like now when we think of it, we have
Yeah,
stickers, ring times, precise times as well that you expect to be on your ring. It's
absolutely.
crazy, and when we look at this, it's just that's just crazy how it's transformed over the last 20 years.
But it's the same venue. I mean, that's the whole
Yeah,
thing. Between the two photographs, we are looking at exactly the same spot in the same venue. Um, over those 20 years, you can even see the little orange signs in the back up there above the ITA flags. Still the same kind of things. But yeah, so same venue, but we've obviously had to move with the times, and we're still trying to push the envelope a little bit and see what can we improve for next year. But what has gone with that is the logistics of moving all of that additional equipment, storing it safely. Tournaments have become massively more, challenging to run, and they require bigger teams. So one person could organise a tournament many years ago with a little bit of help in the last couple of days, whereas now, and the biggest job that you had to do was put people in categories. Whereas now we're using sport data to gather all the information in. Yes, someone has to understand how all of that works. But when you get to the day, you're looking at wireless networks, wired networks, you're looking at the scoreboards, the scoring systems. There's 10 or 11 laptops deployed there, 8 television screens. There's so many different things that are going on with it. But looking for this point of contrast with the setup and the teardown, I actually found some old photos, and I think it's a great time to share them. So in this photo is our umpire chair on the right hand side, at quite a young age, I'd imagine. That's Mr. Carl Smullen sparring. And then our tournament administrator on the left there, that's Mr. Stephen Smullen, getting, and certainly wouldn't have been 13 years of age there, but getting his medal in patterns. While one of our international umpires, Miss Rachel Kennedy, is there on the right hand side. Very likely in her first or second competition. So I just thought, what an incredible kind of look back to see some of these well-known faces now, but at the time, just jumping in there and giving it a go like the rest of us.
brilliant. Yeah, they're the people that are running the show now, and
Yeah,
in particular, Mr. Stephen Smullen there has a tough job running around trying to sort out the sparring categories when there's adjustments to be made and stuff. So yeah, it's not an easy job, and I can only imagine what it was like back in the day when you had to adjust the draws on the fly based on who was there. So it's like night and day, really, and it's just props to the organising committee who have just brought this event on leaps and bounds. And I think it's one of the top events from everywhere we travel to at these competitions. It's one of the more smoothest run events, really well organised, and it's a credit to the organising committee.
so maybe jumping into the impact of the lockdown.
Yeah.
What did you think in terms of the we already spoke a little bit that the patterns were, that the level was quite good, really, and we thought that it might be quite good from the point of view of, everyone's been working technical over Zoom and all the rest of it. But the sparring, what did you think in terms of what you saw in the sparring?
Yeah, for me in particular, I think the skills like adapting to the scoreboard, making decisions on the fly, things like your distance management, timing, things like that. For me, there were things that were just a little bit off.
Yeah,
In particular, those people who had the ability to set an intensity with their rhythm and with their footwork, where they really got a return from my point of view, and they really did well. They were able to dominate matches more often. And I think that these are skills that, like, for some people, they haven't been able to train very well.
yeah,
We've only been back for a little while now, and I think that maybe people who had the luxury of having training partners at home, maybe siblings or other friends that live close by that they could train together during lockdown, maybe I think for those people they had a little bit of an advantage. But I think for the younger people, the skills were definitely on show, and I think not for it's an interesting one, because for the younger guys, sometimes it comes down to the people who are that little bit stronger, a little bit tougher, able to get forward on the front foot. And we don't always see the more skillful competitors come out on top. No, we do a lot of time, but sometimes it's just that person who's a little bit stronger, a little bit tougher, is able to burst through.
and confident going to hands.
Exactly, confident going to hands. And I think that's a big thing. And obviously, after lockdown, if you have that ability, it's almost innate. So it's not really something that was impacted by lockdown too much, where the skill side of it was. So the reading of the distance, shot selection and things like that. So yeah, for us in my particular club, we did a lot of work since we were allowed to come back to sparring on some just live interactions, doing a lot of constraints, what we talk about here on this channel,
For
a
sure.
lot of that and a lot of patterns really. So we kind of stripped back other parts of our training, such as our flexibility training, our kicking,
Yeah,
and
the
things like
technical
that,
kicking
which
is taking a
we
bit of a hit for sure.
and they're things that we did a lot of work on during Zoom, you see. So we did
Yeah.
put in a big shift on these things. So we just need to switch it up a little bit. And I think we've seen a nice return and very happy with the results based on that.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, what I saw where, again, some of my people capitalized on it and then some were kind of fell victim to it was not recognizing where there's an opportunity to continue or to push an advantage, take advantage of momentum. So, you know, failing to recognize that there is a momentum shift happening in the ring. You know, so the scoreboard flips, they get an advantage and they kind of back off and bounce, or you know, so they break through, they get their score, but they don't finish and maximize the score. They don't get to the legs, or some of the ring craft things. So I had a few people who, again, they haven't been in the 14-17 years division before. They were younger before, and they're following around the outside of the ring, or even chasing if they were behind around the outside of the ring, and not understanding how to cut somebody off and how to use the ring to their advantage. But on the flip side, a couple of the ones who express their sparring intelligence a little bit better, that use that massively to benefit. So as you said, adjusted their rhythm. They were able to kind of set and break their own rhythms and really take advantage of that fault in their opponents, where the opponent wasn't reacting to it. They were waiting for stops or breaks from referees, or they were still kind of hanging on that and getting caught with, you know, turning kicks to the body, getting caught with wide open with turning kicks to the head, and you're going, okay, this is happening just because the intensity has changed from what you've been training. The rhythm has changed from a cooperative partner versus a resistant opponent. And I think for me that takes us on to maybe the takeaways in terms of what we saw from our competitors at the championships. Like what will you take from that and apply in your training?
Yeah, for us, I think the one big thing that I noticed from my own competitors in particular is we were very much focused on countering and a little bit passive at times as a result. So it kind of goes hand in hand with your idea of that kind of not taking control of the intensity and the momentum shifts. So they're almost like single interactions where, okay, there's an interaction of contact, let's get through this, and then we reset, and then there'll be another interaction. So the interactions for me were almost like point sparring interactions.
Yeah, definitely.
As opposed to a little bit more continuous. Now, like there was continuous technique, so that people were trying to carry through with punches, etc. But in terms of like transitioning from legs to hands and things like that, for me, I think that that's something that needs to be addressed for us in particular, of just trying to build on that again where we were before and try to almost maximize your advantage in the ring. And that's something that has probably come from a lot of training, almost kind of getting back slowly into the sparring. It's been a while since we were able to do it properly, so I think that does make sense of why that was the case.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that definitely speaks to me in terms of some things that we were seeing, like at a lower level in the kind of the under 10s and even some of the under 13 up to green belt and blue belt, and that there was so many problems that would have been solved by not making an adjustment step into a side kick. You know, there was some things like that we just like, okay, well, look, we have to kind of iron this out, drill this home. And I think the reason is, you know, normally speaking, that isn't a big problem, but it hasn't been tested. It hasn't had the force of correction of someone catching you out and going, oh, well, that was easy to see, so I've caught you. So it hadn't had that in a while. And now once it's live and people were finding angles on it or meeting you in the middle, it's like, oh, well, now that's a problem and now you need to fix it. Equally, I think the ability to take space as well was definitely a big one, where even some of the people that were successful ended up fighting to draws or near draws sometimes by just engaging all the time and not recognizing that they could pull as well as push. And I think definitely an element of training for us will be kind of recognizing when you have the possibility to pull, and then what techniques work for you when you're pulling. So some people will pull and go to hand, some people will pull and, you know, meet the person as they come forward with the legs. We need to have that in there, and that was just one where I thought some people worked too hard because they only pushed and they didn't actually utilize pull.
Yeah, one of the things for me in particular with my own group as well, with the lower guys in particular, is because we do so much constrained stuff that the hands we use generally is just a blitz or more of counter style. So when it came to us countering our hands, I thought we were quite strong, and my guys were picking good moments and good distance management, things like that. But then on the front foot, if it wasn't a blitz and there was like a continuation of hands forward, that's something that we kind of need to work on. And when I think about it, it's something that we don't use in our constraints, because obviously with yellow belts just getting into sparring, I'm not looking for people to go home and having a slugfest at training. Exactly, because it's something that young kids, especially at yellow belt, chances are they're joining Taekwondo because they're quite shy, they're not a big fan of contact in the first place. So when we start sparring, it's not something that I want to like have in my classes, because you'll end up with no students on the floor because they'll cry off eventually and okay, this isn't for me. So I think that's something that needs to be balanced a little bit, of getting to the hands, because it is a big factor at the competitions. Now, for me, it's not something I'm going to hone in on completely, because I'm kind of favouring the more skill development over this, because I feel like that's not a style that's going to get you very far at the top level. And everything that we do is kind of trying to build the kids towards that top level of what will work at the elite level. So it's not something I'm going to definitely
peak as a yellow belt.
Exactly, we're not interested in that. So it's not something that I'm going to like completely change that way, but it's something that I'm going to be aware of in future. And maybe even just on the flip side of it as well, just be more prepared on the flip side of that, with maybe like defensive side kicks and just keeping the distance a little bit longer and things, because some of the referees are they get very excited when there's an exchange with hands and they're counting nearly every single punch. So I see like some of the matches there's like 40 points on some of the scores. So it's something that it is a factor. It's just more so to be aware of than anything. I got to kind of reassess. I don't know if I'm going to change anything in terms of our training style, but it's something to be aware of.
But I mean, it was certainly pointed out there was like, in patches around, like, so particularly on the Sunday where you were running 8 rings, the odd umpire crops up and the scoring is wild or something like that. Yeah. Or you could say, look, the scoring is bad, or the decision making was poor. But again, like in defense of the umpires, for them, same as for our competitors, they haven't had anything to watch in 2 years. So it's or this is their first ever tournament that they're umpiring at, because the people that we would have had umpiring for us 2 years ago on a Sunday have now gone to senior, or they're they've gone off to college, or they're doing different things. So we always, it actually highlighted for me how reliant we are on, it's like that just-in-time supply chain stuff, where we need to just train enough umpires and coaches all the time so that we're replacing the ones that we inevitably lose, trying to make the very best use of the experienced ones, but they tend to be the centre referees, the JPs.
That's it.
So very often it's the corner referees in sparring in particular have the least experience, and when they haven't seen live action in a particular length of time, or it's their first event, it's never a recipe for it to be perfect. So hopefully they stick with it, they get to improve, they get to watch more live matches and have someone shadow them to kind of help them understand the scoring. Because I know I sat down, and I haven't finished doing it yet, but we're sitting down and watching the match footage with our competitors and just going through their matches and talking through what they've done well, what we want to keep with and what we want to improve on for the next time. Really just to focus on why we're doing the exercises that we're doing now and the things that we want them to keep. And some of them are very, very surprised with what I'm saying is and isn't a score, because they're looking at it and they're like, yeah, but I threw all these punches. Like, yeah, but if you threw a punch this way, that's not a score. It might have been if the referee kind of didn't notice, but that wasn't a score. And all the ones that are thrown that don't actually land, they're not scores either. So, just making it clear that, look, that side kick there, that front hand there, that avoid and backhand, those are scores. The rest of it is filler.
Points.
Yeah, the rest of it is filler. But obviously the higher up you go, like if you have a scoreboard that is like 36 to 42, warnings are irrelevant. Like they're never going to come into it. It's only when you have a 6-5, a 4-2, that's when the warnings and the fouls are a big deal. So,
And realistically, there's going to be no matches that have a score over 20 points realistically in a minute and a half. It's not something that should happen. But I think that's actually a factor, Adrian, of why we didn't see a lot of interaction between because of the scoreboards, exactly, because we didn't see people were getting a return for the hands on the front foot, and a nice return most of their interactions, that there wasn't kind of an internal cue to say, okay, maybe I need to finish with the kick, or maybe I need to lead in with my kicks, because they're not getting the return on the scoreboards. I think that's an important thing as well for skill development, because if people notice, okay, all I got to do is just charge forward, pick a good moment to go with my hands and just keep going, it doesn't really encourage much skill development. And like we were saying, the kind of the problems that we've seen that were almost missing from this event. So I think that's an important factor as well.
So yeah, I think just jumping onto the scoreboards then and talking through that, this is the first tournament that we've had scoreboards for all of the rings, particularly for the junior day and the Sunday. So we've been very close to it before. I think in the last tournament, so back in February 2020, we would have had 7 rings, I think, on the Sunday, and we had started with 6 of the 7 with scoreboards, and then unfortunately our scoring system died on one of them, so we ended up with 2 of them not having scoreboards. So we had 8 rings, fully electronic scoring, all with the displays for all of the Sunday, and they worked the whole way through the day, thankfully. But how big a deal did you think that was?
I think the scoreboards are massive, and I know we can almost get problems with the scoreboards because kids are looking at them too much. Like we said, they could be 4-0 up, but they only have 1 point on each card. But I think that learning experience is vital for people, because they have to pick up those skills. Sparring in your club, where it's just you and a training partner, there's an open space and there's not exactly a time limit, there's not live scoring, is not the same as you sparring in a ring with a live scoreboard and 4 corner judges. And I think they're night and day. And like, if that's the game we are training to perform in, I think that the earlier these kids get used to it, the better. Of course, there's like unintended consequences with it as well, but I think that's just part of the experience. I think overall for the long term, it's better for these kids to experience it and understand it, because I think their ring craft, their understanding of the game, what needs to, like, their adaptability, the skills, their decision making, and all these important things for me that are much more important than the techniques and things like that. I think that's a vital thing to pick up at a young age if possible. But see, then it's only the kids then that are going to get to compete maybe 3 times a year are going to experience this, because there's no club in the country has the luxury of having rings, having scoreboards, and having TVs.
Not for their training sessions anyway.
Yeah, to practice this, exactly. So it in a way then as well, there's only probably realistically 3 times a year where kids will experience this.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? There were some unexpected benefits. So I definitely expected, like that, there's a learning curve where the kids can get used to seeing their scores. They'll know how they are, what's effective and what's not. Get used to seeing the time that's left. Get used to seeing where they are in the match. Had all the usual questions that, I was 4-0 up, or I was I was winning 2-0 and then I was losing, and then it was this. How did that happen? Where they don't really understand that what they're being shown is the current state of the judges' decisions rather than, the actual points. Like you were saying earlier, they don't read the little boxes, and we don't want them to really in some ways. Like we'll let the coach interpret that for them. But what was really interesting for me was I was watching some matches where under normal circumstances someone is winning, but they don't know they're winning. Yeah. So they could be quite physically dominant. So they will keep pounding on and keep pushing hard to try and make sure that they win, which means another kid is getting, quite physically intimidated, battered. The referee's having to step in a lot to protect them and so on. Whereas I saw so many situations where a kid got a 4-0 lead by a couple of points, and maybe there's 45 seconds in the match left, and then they just take the foot off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, seen that a lot.
And okay, at a high level, from an entertainment perspective, people might complain about that. But I liken it to, if you were watching a football match and, half time you're 11-0 down, you don't want to watch a team lose 22-0 in the second half. Like, you're hoping that the winning team will start rotating the substitutes, and they're going to, try a bit more adventurous play. They're going to try and do a few different things. They're going to take a few more risks. They're going to let the other team play a bit, and hopefully we might finish it with being 12 or 13-5, or we might get a little bit of play out of it. And I think that's kind of what we saw a little bit, because the scoreboard was there. The coach could be a bit more relaxed. They could go, no, everything is fine, you can calm down. The competitor could look over and see, no, I'm good. And then, that by the reverse of that, in those really good competitive matches where things are very close and the flip is being seen on the scoreboard, oh, you're leading, oh, I'm leading, we got that hugely exciting vibe that you get at the European or World Championships, where the person knows they've work to do. They chase it. And go back to that final that our girls fought out there. Like, that was a hugely entertaining match between two very young girls. Like, they're only 11.
One of my
12.
favorite matches of the whole weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it was just massively entertaining, because and I had another green belt boy against one of David Power's lads, and it was very much the same kind of environment. Went to a draw, extra time, first point. But they wouldn't have known they were playing out a draw. They wouldn't have known they should be pushing for it. They'd have just continued at the same sedate pace through to the end of the round, and then there's a result. And if that had happened, maybe somebody would have won the first round just because they didn't know they were like up or down or whatever. But because they could see it and they knew they had to work for it, you had some really competitive stuff going on, and some really intelligent changes of pace, momentum, all the things that we'd want to see.
Yeah, and there's skills there as well that are important for these young kids to be picking up.
Yeah.
As like you said, that whole idea of something we've practiced leading up to this in my club is, okay, there's 25 seconds left, your training partner is winning, you're losing, and vice versa. And we flip the script on that just to get them a little bit of practice on that, knowing that there's going to be scoreboards there. But then there's almost that unintended consequence then as well, because one of my guys, incredibly clever, he went 4-0 up at the start of each match, and then he just cruised.
Okay.
So then he got to the final, and I feel like he kind of almost wasn't as prepared as the people who had to come through it.
Had to grind.
And he ended up coming So he ended up coming second. So there's a little bit of that as well. It's like, becoming a little bit too passive and a little bit too relaxed. So
they're all lessons. They're all lessons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're all lessons. But I think overall, the picture is very positive for the future of people who are looking to do the sport side of Taekwondo.
So, thinking ahead to our Munster Open and Leinster Open that kick in early next year, like, what are the things we say? I'll come back at it from a tournament point of view, maybe, but from a coach competitor point of view, and it's very important to say, actually, for people watching this, while I was hosting it, Richie was very busy getting top club status for the event. So Richie's club, East Cork, finished at the top of the leaderboard on points. So that's the way we do it in Ireland, is you get 3 points for every gold medal, 2 for a silver medal, and 1 for a bronze for the whole weekend. So the person who finishes at the top of the points leaderboard, first, second and third, we have trophies to them. So best club, second and third. So again, huge congratulations to Richie on that one. But now you obviously have a great big crosshairs on your head, and they will be gunning for you for the next one, because nobody likes an upstart, and nobody likes anyone else winning. So definitely East Cork will have a bit of a target on it. So that's good. That's where you want to be. What's the plan going into Munster and Leinster?
Yeah, so like for us, I think the big realization was the doubling down on the pattern side, and just that difference of training styles was very important for us. So the amount of work that we put in on the technical side and the online library and things like that we've had during COVID has been massive for our technical side, and that has really ramped up our medals, because we were very strong as a club in sparring for many years now. We've got third place on the overall medals twice at the Irish Cup and Munster, so we've been thereabouts, but the big differences are those extra events. So I think that's very, very important that we've kind of stepped that up a notch. On the sparring, I think it's just going to be more of the same. Again, we're going to try to build on those skills, but as we said, it's fantastic to have like these kids winning, and their self-esteem is growing, and they're getting confidence, and it's fantastic. But the goal as a coach is not to have yellow belt champions, it's to build these kids towards the future. So although this stuff we mentioned today is very important, the big picture is what it's all about for me, and pushing towards that bigger picture. So you have this thing that we're talking about, the skill development, not exactly about winning a yellow belt division, and okay, if you just go through like a bulldozer, you're going to win. And it's more about the skill development here and building on those skills that we didn't have time to build on during lockdown. So it's going to be kind of up in that idea with the rhythm changes and those like higher level skills that I would like my competitors to have. I think that that's going to be something to focus on, as well as the beginning and the end of the exchanges. So leading in with your legs into hands and then finishing with a kick ideally as well.
Sure.
So those kind of interactions, as well as those higher level skills we've already mentioned in today's clips.
Yeah, and I think for us, just to add to that, like up until this point, until we had that first tournament, like it's the first tournament in a long time where there was no competition plan for anyone really. There was just a case of, right, let's get in there and try it and see where we are. But out of that, we have the video of the matches that people have, you know, the parents have taken, and now I have that, or what I saw, you know, as a coach. But now we can go and set individual goals. We can talk to people about what it is that they're going to work on between now and February. So they have, you know, December, January, part of February. So they have 2.5 months. And in that time, we want to see progress towards a goal. Now I have a focus for the planning of my sessions. Now they have a focus for which drills are more important to them, or which scenarios are more important to them based on their goals. If they have a pattern performance, they can look at that and say, okay, I won or I lost. These are what I did well. This is what needs to be improved. And it all kind of goes from there. So we can have a benchmark. We can then look at that in February and go, well, how's this goal progressing? And that's really important, because I hate to send someone into a tournament thinking that the only way we can measure whether it was good or not is whether or not they took a medal.
Yeah.
We want them coming out of there, and it was a good tournament because I got to test this and I got this information, and this means that I'm improving, or I need to work more on something. And go for it.
Just to double on to that point as well, is what I said to some of my kids who didn't medal. Some of them have been working really, really hard, and actually harder than some of the others who did medal.
Yeah.
And I said, hard work doesn't care. You will be rewarded eventually. It may not be this time, but anybody who puts in the hard work and they persevere, I've seen it for so many years in Taekwondo, you will be rewarded. So it's just a patience game as well. And obviously this is hard for kids and people who are competing on the Sunday to see all their friends getting medals, but it's about the bigger picture, and like the hard work will always be rewarded, and that's very, very important.
Oh, definitely. And that is exactly what we're trying to do. Is like, in the end, what we're trying to do is build a culture around competition. It's what you do with your team. It's where you go to meet your friends. It's about testing yourself, not beating the other people necessarily. That's part of it, that'll come with it, but it is really about testing yourself and proving to yourself that when you work on something, dedicate your mind, your effort to things, you make improvements, and those improvements are for you, they're for nobody else. So for me, it's just great to be able to restart that whole process once again. And get us to where we want to be with that. So yeah, very, very much looking forward to the next one.
Mm-hmm. I know you want to touch on a little few ideas with the special technique and power as well moving forward.
Yeah, so it really struck us, because what happened is, and I think this is massively because there was people that were out of training and out of practice for, like, there was a big contrast. There's the few people who were training for national team, and they did very, very well. They did what they're expected to do because, well, they've been training it for the last 10 weeks with the national team. But for others, maybe they hadn't had that much training on their special or power breaking for the last little while. It's not been the focus or priority in the clubs. But it still just highlighted a problem, which is that it's not developmental in nature. We're not using those events to develop competitors to be successful in the future. We're using them almost like a test. And this is our benchmark. Click, here we are now. And what it means for me is that you're either able to do it or you're not. And so what happens is people run into the test. If they go into the power breaking, they make 1 out of 5 attempts and that's it, they're done. Then they go, well, what on earth am I lining myself up to do this for? Call it quits, I'm not doing this anymore. So we've a few proposals going forward to the tournament committee to act on. And really it is about adjusting the special technique and power breaking to make them a little bit different from what the international format is, to allow for people to set their own entry level once it's beyond a certain minimum. So for example, let's say the senior males are doing power breaking and the competition requirements say, right, it's 2 boards for everything, 3 boards for sidekick. That's what our entry level is going to be for national championships. Well, maybe we say, look, that would be 11 boards. Okay, let's set the entry level at 8 boards or 7 boards or something along those lines. People can allocate them across the techniques as they wish. They can go above it, and then the idea is that they step forward and they say, okay, can I have a 2-board punch? Happy with that. 1 board for knife hand, it's not for me. I'll go to 4 boards with the side kick. I feel good about that. And they set their stall out.
Interesting.
And the idea is just, look, if it goes well, everybody should break all 5 techniques because they break what they've prepared to break. Or maybe they miss one. But everyone is coming through with a score. And then, hey, I had a score of, so let's say 3 for the full break. And I put up 9 boards. So I have a score of 27. Okay, how does 27 compare to someone who's going to be winning a European Championships? Well, let's say someone has a clear round in the European Championships. They've broken 16 boards. So we're looking at 42. 48. Where are we at? 48. My mental math might be off at the moment. I'll have to have a think back on that. But either way, the premise is basically very simple. It's like, look, if you break all of the boards that are set as a requirement, you have a score. We're letting people set, the idea is that we let people set a lower bar for entry so that they can go out there, test the full measure up execution, the break, etc., and they get a score. Now, in the end, maybe they're they went out with 9 boards and broke and got 27 points. Maybe someone gets 30 points, someone gets 31, whatever it happens to be, and we have a first, second, and third. But you got to actually test your techniques to your capacity. You got to, the way I'd explain it is this: if you go out and do pattern, no one stops you performing to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
You get a score, you might not progress, but you can still go out, perform to the best of your ability and get feedback. The same applies in sparring. Ideally you'd have someone who's a close match for you, you'll have, and not a whitewash either way, but that's what you want. But in special and power, the tendency is to, you get a binary bit of feedback. You get a, nah, you didn't do that, or you get a, you did do that. Black and white. But let's say you broke 2 boards for psychic because that's what was asked of you as a senior female. But maybe you're able to do 3.5. We never got to know if you could do 3.5. Was the 2 boards you broke today any better than the 2 boards you broke 4 years ago? Is there progression? And we know, particularly for something like senior female, you could break all the boards, but that won't get you in the medals because someone else, 3 or 4 or 5 other people are going to do that. So we need to be able to go beyond that. So rather than just putting it back to, well, train it in your club and keep a journal or whatever, we'd like you to have a competitive score. We'd like you to be going into the competition. Let's say it's special technique and it's 600 centimeters was your total. Well, in the next tournament, if you do 610 and the next year you're doing 635, well, you've improved. And you've improved because your score went up.
Pushing the boat.
Yeah, exactly.
Across, so you might see somebody who comes out and they're really pushing it to get a crazy overhead kick.
Yeah.
And that's going to increase the level for everybody then. I really like that idea.
But what's also interesting for me is I think it allows for some gamesmanship and some psychological play too, because let's say you and I are going out for special technique, and I know in the last competition you put up, let's say, 255 for your overhead, and you've got a total of whatever it happens to be. But I'm looking at that going, 255, okay, but Richie's entered at 250. Oh, there's an opportunity here. I could go for 255 and get 5 up on Richie here, but 255 is my limit. That's the top that I can do. Whereas Richie's gone in conservative to make sure he gets the 250 score. And then it's that whole thing of, well, do I just line up my 5 scores and say, look, that's what I'm going to go and do? Or do I push the boat on one because I think I'll need that to get into the medals? Or, and so if I push the boat and I miss one, well, I could be out of the medals altogether. So it brings up that whole gamesmanship and a bit of strategy.
That's pretty cool.
So a little bit of play on that. We'll have to see how it goes. And I'm even playing with the idea of how the tiebreakers might work. So let's say with the special technique, you tie on, let's say it's, 800 centimeters, whatever it is, right? Make a random number up. But you're tied for first and second. Well, how do we do a tie break? Currently what would happen is you're tied on your score in terms of number of flags, but we pick a technique at random. The judges decide to raise it by 5 or 10 centimeters, and then you go and attempt that. Well, how about if we said, look, no, you can pick any technique from your 5 that you want, and you tell us how much you want to raise it by. And so now it's Richie's going, well, I can definitely pop 5 onto that flying side kick. I could probably do 5 on the turning kick as well. I think I was maxed on my overheads. So do I do 5 on the flying side kick? And Adrian's after coming in here saying he's going to stick another 10 on his turning kick. It's like, oh, okay. So we get into, again, a little bit of match play. And I think that makes the event exciting for the competitors, for the spectators. We're going to see bigger jumps.
Urges more participation.
Yeah, because even if you're not 100% there, you can go out and get 5 techniques and get 5 scores. And you have, like you would in powerlifting or something, you went like 5 clear attempts. Cool. Now you have a score. Your score places you somewhere on the leaderboard, and you can build on that score for next time. Rather than you went through and got a 0. Oh, that's crushing. I'm not going to do that again. Whereas if I went through and I got 5 out of 5 and I got a low score, well, a low score can be built on. A 0 can't. A 0 is just devastating. Like, where do you go from there? So, there's a few bits to consider, but looking forward to the thought experiment.
Yeah, and if anybody has some suggestions on this in the comments, get them in there. We use it as a bit of a discussion as well. So kind of use that as a back and forth to almost think through these ideas, and hopefully people might come up with ways that we can get around any potential issues with this as well. But yeah, we'll have a couple of coaches flying around with calculators.
Absolutely. Well, I need to just make sure of my math before we finalize it.
Yeah. No, some great ideas there. So great to be back. Great to get those feedback loops again going, and okay, let's work on this, let's go and try this, and that's what we love doing. So it's great to be back. We have our Munster Open in February, Open Dutch for some people in January as well. So I don't want to jinx it, but it looks like we're back. So yeah, it's good to be back.
Super. So folks, we will finish this one for today. Any thoughts, any comments, any ideas for future episodes, please, as always, drop them in the comments or send it to us on any of our social media. Looking forward to the next one. See you Friday.
Catch you in the next one.